Lesson 116 is about the quotient rule for square roots. Now way back in lesson 63 we learned about the product rule for square roots. Remember, that was if you had something like this, square root of mn, that's the same thing as square root of m times the square root of n. Now the quotient rule is real similar to that. Say you had this relationship, square root of m over n. Well, you can change that into the square root of m over the square root of n. So a real similar idea here. Let's just do a practice problem. I want you to simplify that, the square root of 5 over 19. So you could just change it to the square root of 5 over the square root of 19. Now, that's not where you stop though. Listen carefully on this. You cannot have a square root sign in the denominator. That's not considered the accepted or standard form for a ratio like that. It's not like that's incorrect to leave it like that, but when you see a problem like this with a radical sign and square roots in the denominator, you just have to remember that that's not the standard form. The standard form is to get rid of that square root sign in the denominator. And so all you do is multiply above and below by the square root of 19. Because anytime you multiply the square root of a number by itself, you get rid of the square root sign, right? And so now we'll end up with the square root of 5 times square root of 19, which would just be the square root of 95, over positive 19. And that is considered the simplified form of that rational expression there. What we did was called rationalizing the denominator. If you did the square root of 19 on your calculator, you would get a number with an infinite number of decimal places. That's called an irrational number when it can't be put in the form of a fraction. 19, that can be put in the form of a fraction or a rational number, right? It could be 19 over 1. Hence the name rationalizing the denominator. So on these problems, they are in simplified form. They're considered simplified if the denominator is a rational number. Let's do one more. Simplify that, and you know you have to simplify it because you have a square root value in the denominator, and so that's an irrational number. Now if it was like a square root of 16 or something like that, that just equals 4, so we could just simplify the square root like that. But the square root of 11 is an irrational number. You can even type it in on your calculator to prove it to yourself. And so we need to multiply above and below by the square root of 11 to simplify this expression. First though, put that sum in parentheses. Always you need to do that anytime you're going to be doing some multiplication. And that reminds you that you'll be expanding the numerator. Now the denominator just becomes an 11. And so we can just say over 11. And then the numerator, we do square root of 11 times square root of 7, would just be the square root of 77. And then plus 2 times the square root of 11. And so that is our simplified form for that expression. We have a rational number in the denominator now. So anytime you see these problems like this, where you have a square root sign in the denominator, you rationalize the denominator by multiplying above and below by that denominator, and that gets rid of your square root. Okay, well that's all for lesson 116.